Okay, principles and goals accessible design. Part 1, accessible, provide equal flexibility. Part 2, Part 3, beyond accessibility, universal design. Part 4, historic acceptable facility design. Part 1, overview. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal to the Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776. In daily life we maneuver through society. Nothing is more yet taken for granted more than often access. For millions of people with a disability, access most of the use of state grant is difficult and impossible to achieve only with the intervention of a third party. We live in what is considered an independent society. Independent access program, facilities, and employment is not easily achievable by many. Physical access, the historical arbiter, a successful source of opportunity, education, employment, social freedom, accessibility, civil rights is many of them for many people with disabilities and for society, such as see history, accessibility, facility design, learn more. Whole building design requires balanced, integrated approach of all design objectives, including accessibility. So information of these accessibilities must be considered together in order to other design objective of the total project context in order to achieve quality and high performance buildings. Shows high performance buildings, 12 o'clock clockwise, sustainability, safe, secure, functional, aesthetics, historic, productive, accessible, cost effective. Definition, goals, accessible design. Principles and process for support accessible design include understanding law codes and standards that apply, know what laws apply, what standards were referenced depending on the type of the product. Product development, government versus private entity, project use for the resident, retail, office, etc. Funding source, public versus private, building type, new construction, renovation, housing type, single family, multifamily, housing, ownership, a condo, or rental. See here for more information. Plan for access. Successful integration, acceptable design to the whole building. Design requires careful consideration, potential conflicting goals for this project. Earliest stage design must include and identify conflicts with all synergies in order to meet the challenges. Sustainability, historic provision, safety, security, and aesthetics can be problematic for accessibility. The following are a few examples. Parking lot with a new state of office building designed with the previous pavers to maintain sustainable gains. Goals, pavers have the option, openings of 5/8 of an inch of the pavers located along the accessible route with the building violate accessible standards, which requires the maximum opening of a quarter or a half inch. Historical federal building and a monumental entrance of the 5 foot above grade, accessed only by stairs. The state historic preservation officer has determined the altering an entrance to include the wheelchair ramp would destroy historical fabric, irreparable damage for the building, of the GSA acceptable standard provides an exemption allowed for all the alternative entrances in case in order to provide access that all the persons with disability will not be able to enter the building through the main entrance. A new city courthouse has been lowered. Office for the corridor, lighting, power, densities, levels, mandate local energy code requirements to reduce energy consumption, person low vision, public safety, and staff adversely affected with the requirements because of the required brighter lighting, facilitate function in the spaces. A new federal courthouse, 4 foot by 4 foot security planners installed with the perimeter of the site. The planners are spaced 2 foot and 10 inches apart across the accessible route in the building. Planners are a violation of GSA accessible standard that requires a minimum clearance of 3 foot between the planners cross-sectioning the accessible route. An architect has designed performing arts center for the sleeping soap site with the entry location requires person on foot and required a 10 foot downhill change in the level of from the street where the public transportation is available. The architect has designed series of landscape terraces and stairs to get from the street to the level of the plaza in front of the entrance, but has not included ramps because they were compromised in his design. Instead, he has used an enclosed elevator with a disabled person. 2 months after the center opens, the elevator has mechanical problems. Has identified potential conflict with the conceptual level of the project integrated design team environment to avoid problems and conflicts, such as the example cited. This result of the thorough successful project of all the stakeholders. Planning access into the facility, plan location, accessible entry for the facility, access points with the position buildings on the site with a limited travel distance of the people with disability of the site, arrival points such as public sidewalk, public transportation, stop and parking, and 2 accessible building of the facility entrances. Providing accessible routes require low effort where impossible with the provide walks with no more than 1/20th of running slope over the ramp. The ramps are required design ramps of lower running slopes, not a maximum permitted, 1/12 permitted. Provided equivalent access to the travel options provided for the people without disability. Provide equivalent safety and compliant access for the facility, maximum security. Plan access space for the facility. Plan layout for the facilities to the best accommodate all the person, including with a disability, such as the layout space for whenever the possible limited travel distance between the elements within the space. Group and centralized space with a limit of the amount of travel required with the space, for instance, for the residential garden style apartment complex, centrally locating the swimming pool with the associated amenities, preferred for the locating swimming pool with the amenities on one end of the site. Limit of the need between the level of the reliance of the elevators just powerfully, although obviously not open option between the stones of the high-rise building, and limiting the need of the vertical access within the site with a 1 or 2 story facility between intermediate level of the high-rise facilities, reduce the likelihood of interruption and accessible route to the elevator or lift. The malfunction limited the need for the install ramps where vertical access is required between 2 levels. Ramps designed to lower the grade and option permit with the guaranteed access ramps can often be essentially creatively integrated within the design without negatively impacting aesthetics. For instance, integrated ramps next to the swimming pool can avoid the need for the installing of an industrial-looking pool lift, which can clearly stand out of the overall design. Choose lighting options to accommodate people with low vision. Provide equal access and flexibility. Accessible design business all at some point of their life. The goal is accessible design. Provide equal use of the building environment for all the people. Incorporate best practice accessible compliance. Overall best practices achieve the compliance with accessible regulations should be considered through the entire project cycle. Include conceptual design for the construction completion and go beyond accessible universal design. Be proactive by the planning for flexible design features. Products will increase the likelihood of providing equal access over the life cycle of the facility. Understanding the relationship between universal design and health, integral part of the design of high-performance spaces within to the people with a disability, incorporating health and wellness into the built-in environment. Related to industry issues, building information modeling. Building information modeling is digital representation functional characteristics of the facility, such as services, shared knowledge, resource of the information about the facility, forming a reliable basis of the decision during its life cycle for inception or onward. Building information modeling has the potential to truly integrate accessible for the project, considering with accessible early throughout all phases of the project. Real anthropometry. Anthropometry is the study of the dimensionability of the human body. The idea of the center of the Buffalo Star with a major long program established database for the anthropometry wheeled mobility in 1999. The program initiated with the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center of the Universal Design in Buffalo. The U.S. Access Board began support the effort in 2001. The final report of the anthropometry wheel mobility project is now available. Click here to download the PDF anthropometry wheel mobility report prepared by the U.S. Access Board. Accessible design with a relationship to sustainability design. Whole building design must consider the relation between accessibility and sustainability simply by the putting of the buildings which are not designed to accessible and not suitable for the sustainable building sensitive for the environment to all the use of the design building and equatable with the greatest number of the people achieve complying with the regulatory acceptability requirements, incorporating universal design visibility concepts, including the adaptability design feature. For some time, federal, state, and local law of the codes have required accessible design. Most building types for the one required accessibility but not incorporated on set of the design during construction. The risk of the non-compliance of even litigation exists. The risk result could include required retrofitting building due to lack of the accessible compliance with the create with unnecessary waste and energy not consistent with the goals and sustainability. Sustainability access intrinsically linked into the design process. For example, locating buildings site with the optimized solar orientation accessible with the building entrance that must be taken into compilation. Solar orientation creates condition that result of the building of the entrance located with the circuitous route from the site of the arrival points. Accessibility must be also considered when selecting sustainability material. For example, the previous papers may have specified with increased water infiltration, but the installation of the papers resolve the wide space between them unstable ground surface accessible is not achieved. Lighting levels and low vision. Low vision division committee or LVDC with the national NIBS recognize the need of all occupants of the building environment, include those low vision, should have adequately lighting level. The improvements of the design operational procedures have new existing facilities for the committee to develop the design guidance for the enhanced functional safety and quality of life. 21st century workspace. The highest cost of the office space within the mini urban area with a shrinking budget for the space for the use of the telework, flexible working schedule, hoteling, virtual work, and new technologies such as teleconferencing, webcasting, telepresence, virtual phones, WebEx have been moved to designers to plan downsize office of the space wherever the number of the work workstation significantly lower the number employed in order to maximize use of space within whether the owned or leased within the arrangement with the manager of the employees share of the same workspace. There are no private offices with a docking station and laptop computers. Single to double the monitors that are provided with each of the workstation with no desktop computers, so each of the person must bring with a laptop with a computer with them on the office day. But there are also no reception for the counters and space for the common breaker rooms that contain cabinets, counters, refrigerators, and microwaves, ovens with the may have shared with a multiple organization. Common shared printers that are kept at the minimum. There are no individual printers, but they are also commonly communal coat closets adjacent to the workspace for the coats and umbrellas, etc. GSA with the federal agency with the using system known as the Bookit. For employees to reserve workstation for the new type of the work environment, employees can reserve the workspace for the maximum of 2 weeks in advance. There's no guarantee that they will get some of the workstation, even the 2 of the consecutive day of the workstation reserved for an hour of the check-in time with every each reservation day. When the employee arrives, they're notified of the book system that the space cannot be taken by any other individual. Some individual lock, electronic combination locks, hold valuables, and essential items come in storage space for the lateral the files limited to the available the program file with the documents required for the employees to do their job. There is also touchdown stations that are not subject to the booking kit, which can be used with employees which do not book their workstations in advance because of the lack of availability or because of the only office for them the part of the work day. Private telephone conversations, small meetings that accommodate small glass enclosed rooms with a table of 3 to 4 chairs with adjacent with a common workspace. These rooms are used as an ad hoc basis. The larger conference rooms are also managed through a bucket system that do not belong to any specific organizational entity. Some of the possibility of the large meetings may take place in locations where the other specific organizational space is located. Employees with disabilities who require special assistance with technology is also certain employees with a large amount of the technology required for their job that are not portable that require the special consideration exemption for the general way the space is utilized provided with a dedicated workstation. However, because of the person with certain disabilities require for the provision of higher level of significant glare reduction, audio amplification, etc. commonly shared with the space, office space could be removed. The obstacle that even though they have a dedicated workstation considered including adjustable height workstations as well that will allow variation and flexibility in workspace needs. See changing nature of organizational work and workspace. Relevant codes and standards, laws, and guidelines. You have the ASME, International Code, National Fire Protection Uniform, Federal Assistance Guidelines, American with a Disability, Architectural Barriers, Architects Accessibility Guidelines, Building Accessible, Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines, Laws, American Disability Act, Architectural Barriers Act, Fair Housing Amendment Acts of 1988, and Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Section 504 and Section 508. Additional resources, federal mandate legislation, etc., organization, federal agencies. The major resource for the guidance for the accessible design, U.S. Access Board, the Access Board, an independent federal agency that devoted for the accessibility of the people with a disability. Key responsible for the board to develop and maintain with accessible requirements for the built environmental transit vehicle with the telecommunication equipment, electronic and information technology, medical diagnostic with equipment, provide the technical assist for the training with those guidelines with the enforcing accessible standards, federally funded facilities, and for additional resource for the accessibility board's listing of the other resources for the animations of the accessible solutions for the animation page. You have the Department of Defense, the Department of Housing and Urban Development Office of the Fair Housing Quality Opportunity, and Section 504 Rehabilitation Act and HUD accessible requirements for building. Department of Justice, the Department of Veterans Affairs, General Services Administration, U.S. Navy, the U.S. Park Service, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Public Post Office, Postal Service, publication for the 1995 Accessible Building Product, Access for the Design, George Covington for the Bruce Hannon, Accessible Housing Design filed by Barrier Free Environments, Incorporated, New York, John Wiley Sons. Authors, Building Research Information Knowledge Base, Accessible Course, Whole Building Design Guide, Continuing Education. Part 2, Provide Equal Access and Flexibility. Overview. For the American with Disability, accessibility means to being able to enjoy, participate in many aspects, including work commons for the leisure activity, removing the architectural barriers may allow the people to circulate within and around the facility, other factors for the transportation with the ability to fully participate in activities, design other suppliers and serve the goods and needs to provide equal access for all without under-deeming needs for the people with a disability. What is equal access? To provide equal access means ensuring all the individuals can transport the building facility with the program, services, employment, the opportunity, technology also means the offering all of the users for the same provision, privacy, and security and safety. Design provisions, the professional can promote the equal access. Equal access for the incorporating, integrating, acceptable, the universal, the design feature for the building design program, provide the equal access for the program phase and planning phases of the project required with the building with the stakeholders involved with the project. Critical decisions made during the initial programming planning phase of the project can be very greatly impacted with providing equal access for some of the case effective of the not the equal access can be achieved. For instance, for the building orientation on the site with the affect of the installation of the ramp necessary for the action for the interest of all the design professionals must be aware accessible the requirements of the apply with the project design professionals may be done with the assistance of the consultants, specializing accessibility requirements, knowledgeable, detail-oriented contractor for the key ensuring the equal accessible access achieved during the construction phase of the contractor for the not knowledgeable for the construction accessible features. Equal access that may be compromised with the many instances of the equal access achieved during the construction process depending on the contractor installation technique. For example, the accessibility threshold of the design with the maximum of the half inch of the height with the typically inch of the shield beneath it not installed properly can result in the constructed threshold more than 1/2 inch high. Why provide equal access and provide equal access? Providing equal access, remove the discrimination, protect human rights, accept for the build with the environment, provide the opportunity for all of the people to fully appreciate and contribute with the family, community, with the society, equal access for the office, for the individual occasion, for the improve the quality of life, for the continuing of the life of the living of themselves, their families, and other people in the world. Finally, providing equal access is required to vary the degrees in order to meet the applicable building codes, accessible standards, the accessibility guidelines. How do we achieve equal access? Equal access must be an integral part of the life cycle process and not an afterthought during planning, program, designing, construction, operation, and maintenance, including staff and the training of the building and facilities. Accessible features should be blended seamlessly with the design. Stakeholder of the project should be worked together, stay with the coordinate, optimize with the design site within the building, and the building site should be designed integrated with the whole rather than the collection of the isolated system with the whole building design functional with the ensure the appropriate product system and integration. Design construction decision impact accessibility single building elements should not be added, deleted, or modified any time of the building until life of the building until they are coordinated evaluated with the other element system with the whole building package of all the parties involved. Keep in mind equal access apply with the program serve the benefits for the transportation, fixture, furnishing, and equipment for the employment opportunities and the technology of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. An aspect of all programs conducted with the federal agency and programs receiving the federal financing and assistance in federal employment practice for the federal contractor, federal procurement practices. Relevant codes and standard laws and guidelines, ASME, the National Fire Protection Association, International Code of Council's Guideline, American Disability Architecture Builders Act, Accessibility Guidelines, Building and Facilities, Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines, Guide for the ADA, Accessible Standards, Laws, American with a Disability Architectural Barriers Act, the Fair Housing Amendment of 1988, Rehabilitation Act 1973, Section 504 and Section 508, Organization International Code, Council of the International Living Future Institute, Living Building Challenge, National Fire Protection Association, Federal Agency for the Guidance for the Accessibility, U.S. Access Board for the Access Board, Independent Federal Agency for the devoted for the accessibility of the people with disability, keep responsible over the board for the development to maintain accessibility requirement of the built environment of transit vehicle, the telecommunication equipment, the electronic information technology, medical diagnostic equipment to provide with the technical assistance training of the guidelines for the enforcing the accessibility standard of the federal funded states, sites, or facilities reach over the accessible, limiting the other reach over the animation may accept for the solution to be found with the animation page. Department of Defense, Department of Housing, Urban Development, Office of Fair Housing, Equal Opportunity, the Department of Justice, the Department of Veterans Affairs, General Services Administration, U.S. Navy, the Parking Services, and the Department of Transportation, Postal Services. Publication of the 1995 Accessible Building and Product Code, the Access Building Design with George A. Covington, Bruce Hanley, New York, John Wiley Sons, Incorporated, 1996. Accessible Housing Design File by Barry Free, Environment of New York, John Wiley Sons, in October 2010. Others, Building Research and Information Knowledge Base, and the special thanks to Lex Freedom and the Training Accessible Course Whole Building Design Guideline Continuing Education. Part 3. Beyond Accessible Universal Design. Overview. Accessible with the architectural barrier with the 1968 with the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, Fair Housing Act Amendment of the 1988, and the American with a Disability Act of the 1990 established minimum requirements for the protection of the people with disability, discrimination, bill for the environment of Ron Mace for the FAIA, Ruth Ether Hall, Lusher for the need the reevaluate legal mandate for the ensure usability by the people with the disabilities, but some of the experience with the accessible law of the universal design with the term of the revised approach for the base for the promise for the environment would be more accessible than minimum requirements required for the designers focus attention on the proof of the function of the large range of the people at a broadcast level. The universal design consider the designing with the diversity of the equity. The script of the definition of universal design. Universal design is called for the inclusive design for the law of the lifespan, the design with the initial conceive the universal design is focused with the usability issue for the design product with the environment to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without needed adaptation or special design. In the last 10 years, emphasis was brought in water issue for the social inclusion of the new definition more relevant to all of the citizens without ignoring the people with disabilities and stay with the universal design of the process of enabling the empower with a diverse population by improving human performance, health, and wellness and social participation within. In short, the universal design makes life easier and healthier and friendly for all. Universal design increases the potential for the developing better quality of the wide range of an individual, reduce the stigma by putting people with disabilities on an equal playing field. While it does substitute with the assistive technology, universal design benefits people with functional limitations, social whole the society as a whole, the support for the principal being of the self-reliant, social engaged for business and government with reduced economic burden with a special program, specialized for the design, the assist of the individual, certain citizens, clients, or customers. Proponents of the universal design must recognize that the product for the environment that can never be usable by every person over the world, but the truth of the management practice policy with the benefit of the universal design. Think of the universal design should be therefore considered the process rather than the end state. There are never an end of the quest for the improve the usability, health, and social participation. So the attention to more of the just for the built environment is needed to achieve these three broad outcomes. The universal design feature for the include the automated door for the provide the interest for the people, the abilities integrated with the future components. Power communication systems may outlast more convenient with the multi-sensory interactive wayfinding model to enable the almost any of the perfectly comfortable operator to learn the public man with a directory system. The following table to provide some of the examples of the difference between universal design and acceptable design. Universal design home plan costs is the same as the other building than any other one can purchase. Accessibility. A customer can design a home based with the existing plan who require the additional cost for the redesign custom construction details. Home improvement. The server the incorporate universal design basic and service. Home accessible. Home modifications server the contract charge more than the specialized knowledge design with a disability and aging. Universal automobile instrument control for the customer that accommodate difference of the perceptibility, abilities, statures, and motor abilities and preferences. The accessibility assistive technology used to adapt the automobile to display people with special needs. No step building entry that everyone can easily together. Building accessibility, the building entry of the ramp, the side of the out of way where all the visitor of the access of the code. Hotel with 100% universal design rooms, variety of the types. For the universal accessibility for the hotel, only the code required percentage of the accessible rooms. Application Principal Universal Design. Principal Universal Design was to be by a team of U.S. experts organized with the Central Universal Design at North Carolina State University in the 1990s. Accompanied with the set guidelines of the principal, they were a variable tool clarifying universal design for early adopters. Principal universal design, equitable use, flexibility, simple initiative, perceptive information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space for the approach and use. The 8 goals of universal design. 8 goals of universal design developed in an effort for the update of the principle to clarify the concept of the universal design, incorporate the human performance, health, wellness, social participation, and outcome of the drive for the contextual, cultural issue. For example, there are many of the source of the contextual difference for the topographic environment. Economical development levels with the cultural norms, local values, and the influence of the way of the designer with the implement the universal design and for the highly value of the place for the preserving cultural resource for the like historical buildings, natural resource for the attempts for the enhance for the accessibility. However, often with the conflict with the two goals, universal design must address the conflict with the overcome the perception with the get away with the reaching out with the important design goals. One barrier to adoption with the universal design is the middle and lower income country for the perception of the often perceived the idealistic expense for the imposition Western values. It's realistic, appropriate with the knowledge with the design strategy will be adapted with the different places by the different cultures. Some cases, with achieving the level of accessibility required by Western norms could be counterproductive. It is important that the universal design strategy addresses the cultural values associated with the social, economic, physical context. Addition with addressing these concerns, 8 goals, universal design with achieving the universal design to bodies with the knowledge, identify measured outcomes. Body fit, accommodate the wide range of body size and ability. Comfort for to keep the demand for the desirable limit to the body function. Awareness, ensuring the critical information for the use of the easy perceived. Understanding, making method of operation intuition clear and ambiguous. Wellness, continuing the health promotion of avoidance for the disease prevention, injury. Social integration, treating all groups with dignity and respect. Personalization, incorporation with opportunity, choice, and expression of individual preferences. Cultural appropriateness, respecting and reinforcing cultural values, social, economic, and environmental context with the design project. Expanding adoption. Universal design has been not adopted extensively within the design community as some of the other recent design movements for the sustainability historic preservation. One challenging function facing an adaptation with the continued perception of the universal design's disability reach for the professional, continuing the education to develop the community for the practice, especially among educators is a priority. In addition, just leadership and energy and environmental design guidelines for the certificate and for the program were created with the response for the popularity for the greater domain for the conservation of the energy material resource for the set for the universal design guideline for the need of the designer adequate to respond with the increase of the diverse population. Innovative Solution Universal Design Program launched in 2008 with developed by the multidisciplinary group of the Universal Design Expert. Universal Design contains more than 500 universal design solutions related with the commercial buildings. To help development teams achieve the goals of the Universal Design, its Universal Design Facility integrated with the Universal Design all stage of the project with the design process for the policy practice for this. This is Wbdg.com. The tools provide the step-by-step checklist for the project team and the goals for the ongoing inclusivity. Design projects that utilize the sufficient number of solutions submitted with the appropriate documentation eligibility and the Universal Design Certification voluntary is Universal Design provides comprehensive advanced evidence-based approach to the design that exceed the minimum requirements, accessible regulations that are the only available tool to systematically evaluate the Universal Design buildings. Emerging issue, the use of the universal design growing popularity. Many of the new issues have captured the attention of the design professional with the colleague for the related profession with the issue for the close for the relation with the universal design, include with the aging of the space, the sustainability workplace for the design, public space for the social justice. The universal design must over the contributed to social with any of the social problem, usability, social participation play over the major role of the design response. Aging in place, a large majority of individuals went to age for the currently live. Aging in a place for the other numerous social financial benefits that promotes the key to successful aging and life satisfaction, health, and self-esteem. 2021 AARP survey indicates that about 3/4 of the 50 and up would like to stay in their current home, the communities for as long as possible, compared to about half of those of the 18 to 49 who feel the same. In order to remain in the homes, 34% of the older responded to recognize that they need to make physical change of their home to remain in their own homes while aging, with the needing to have the design adapt to the wide range of the health conditions. Traditional design, allowing encouraging housing producers to adapt the universal design features and key aspects of the design, aging, and in place. This includes non-step entry bathrooms, accessible floor level, the potential for the sleeping distance, accessible level, the good lighting, efficient space planning, and the other feature for the reduced efforts for the accommodation short-term and chronic disabilities. Common aging places and features: one non-step path with a non-step entry that can be in the front, of the side, of the rear, through the garage, 1/4 to 12-inch thresholds. 1.5-inch thresholds. No steps allowed with the patio, balconies, and terraces. 1/4 to 1.5-inch thresholds. Doorways have at least 34 inches wide, clear opening with appropriate clearances. Door handles have 34 to 38 inches from the floor. Hallways passage with a 42-inch clear minimum. Access to at least one full bath of the main floor with the reinforced walls and toilet and tubs for the future insulation grab bar for the cabinetry. Kitchen allowed for the person to work on the seated position. Lighting switches with electrical outlets 24 to 48 inches from the floor. The stairways with the tread, the width of at least 11 inches deep, the right with no greater than 7 inches high. Good lighting throughout the house including the task lighting of the critical locations under the kitchen cabinets. Non-glare surface with contrasting colors to promote the good perception of edges and boundaries. Clear floor spaces at least 30 to 48 inches from all appliances and fixtures and cabinetry. Front loading and laundry equipment. Applicable kitchen closet. Storage adjustable shelving within 28 to 48 inches comfortable reach zone. Sustainability. Sustainable products either design with the redesign with the operate with the people with a limited function in order to comply with accessibility laws, but they also can be used to have the usable broader population will not be effective for the practice due to their novelty. They often present usability issue with the end users. They can resolve the replacement of the product, even abandoning with the goals of sustainability, except with the issue with the sustainability product that can be enhanced with the universal design. Consider the equipment. Example, the waterless urinal. Every man restroom requires at least one lower urinal. Most waterless urinals are only designed with a higher traditional position, which means that they may cause the maintenance problem that even require accessible to traditional water-operated urinal to supplement the waterless unit. Some require special clearance to protect finishing with a special tool for the procedure for the chain with the trap to properly maintain with the urinal ceases to function in the state emitting odor, anger building occupants owners. Bad experience like this can result in replacing the product and even abandoning the goal of sustainability. Workplace, universal design, critical consideration, designing workplace environment applicable to adults with a spend with a significant time on working, thus making working environments important spaces in daily life. People with disabilities, however, being employed with less than half as much of the non-disability counterparts. They need more accommodation work environments and gain as if the prevalence of the disability older adults of the workforce increases. And as work and organization increase the travel, remove the barrier of all parts of participation traditionally excluded for the groups such as the racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, women and members and gender of the sexual orientation minorities. Good design of the workplace can help increase the popular participation. People with a disability in the workforce can help ensure that fewer accommodations will be needed with the employee that has disability. Additional achieving the highest level of usability work environment, increase the overall task efficiency, productivity, employee morale, general safety. Also helps employer attract and keep the broad and diverse workforce. Common workforce features. All control of the comfortable reach zone between 24 inches and 848 inches above the floor. Ample and securable storage employees' personal possession for the comfort of range of 24 inches and 48 inches above the floor. At least one automated door building, preferable with one close to the employee parking lot. Public transportation counter heights for the workstation with adjustable buffet. Workforce, wide range of the statute of the visual abilities, cubicles and devices for the given individual's workers some control over the noise. Designated break action for the quiet and comfortable to allow the workers to place recovery with the work demands and socialize others. High adjustable work surfaces between 28 inches and 32 inches were frequently even stored 24 and 48 inches and within 24 inches of maximum reach of the arc from the elbow. Sound absorbent materials on the walls and floors keep an ambient noise level that would be impossible because the background noise cannot be eliminated. Storage containers provide an option for the carrying, pushing, pulling, and rolling. System and employee with adjusted light level of the workplace is the best for the requirements of specific tasks, individual ability, performance. Wheelchairs, adjustable height seat with a recirculating tilt function with a lumbar support with an adjustable armrest to the high back to support neck and head. Work situated so that the employee communicate actively with the visual and verbal modes of the communication workstation, accommodated with the both stand and seated. Also referred to sit, stand, workstation using that whenever available, wherever possible. Public spaces that include facility of the open for the public and store with the restaurant, with the amusement park, for the other recreation area, of the street, right ways, transportation system, public accommodation, critical demand, universal design because of the shape of the key of the participation activities that include with the engagement, civil affairs, employment, the recreation and education community, and mobility. Common universal design features in public space for the drinking fountains group for the amenities to make them easier located, direction, percentages, wayfinding clues there throughout, light providing along with the outer doorway pathways. Nodes connected directly with the pathway, resting place throughout the site with the restaurants appropriately sized to support large numbers of users at the same time. Signage placed for the sight line, signage alternate language as well as English, visual and tactical warning, surface wall fence for the landscape feature for the guidance for the key destination. Social justice throughout the world, the designers a sense of the responsibility for the consent for the good design within many other resources for the society with a commodity you may not afford. And although initially focused on the disability right, the universal design focused on the civil right issue because of the ultimate design of diversity with the concern of the social justice of all. Universal design should be given the attention, support, active for the housing, education, healthcare, transportation, other resources within society for all those groups that have been excluded with the full participation. Universal design particularly appropriate with the context of design low income minority groups that often have the higher rates of disability than the general population. Additional resources of the organization, Association, American Associated Retired People, the Center of the Inclusive Design Environmental Access, Center of the Inclusive Design Innovations, Decision of All Design for All Foundation, Institute for the Human-Centered Design, federal agencies, the National Endowment for our Arts, and the National Institute of Disability Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research. Publications, Inclusive Design, Implementation, Evaluation, Inclusive Housing, a Pattern Book, a Principle of Universal Design, Version 2, Trends on Universal Design, UDNY 2, Universal Design is Rehabilitation Strategy, Universal Design is Creating Inclusive Environments, Universal Design Handbook, 2nd edition, Universal Design, Humbleness of the User-Centered Business, Activity, Living in Place, Movement, the Supporting Age of the Place and Well, Findings of Cluster Analysis, Reason for the Aging in Place, Perception, Well-Being, Understanding Aging in Place for the Home and the Community Features Perceived the Age Friendliness of the Community and Intention toward the Aging in Place, and What is Aging in Place, Confusion and the Contradictions, and Part 4. History of accessible facility design. The accessible movement of the common roots of the civil rights of the movement. The Civil Rights Act of the 1960s. The roots lie with the structure of the implementation law of the dealing with accessibility. The first national recognized accessible design standard of the American National Standard Institute. A117-1 accessible usable building facility with abilities for the 1961. The standard was based on the use of the research for the University of Illinois, funded by the Easter Seals Research Foundation. Served an important feature for the previous entities for the local and state government with the 1974. The standard received the federal and input with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Joint Secretary within committee with the charge within the standard. The awareness that many of the access was unable to access buildings prompted to the first step in the tour with accessibility requirements. In 1968, since 1968, our Architectural Barriers Act was passed. The federal government has taken steps to address accessibility enforcement in the facilities designed, built, altered, and leased to use during certain federal funding. Alright, the timeline below details many of the important steps, milestones, accessibility design requirements. 2020, with the July 26, 2020, marked the 30th anniversary enactment of the American Disability Act. 2017, U.S. Access Board issued the new accessibility with the stamp of the medical diagnostic equipment under Section 510 of the Rehabilitation Act, stamp of the provided design criteria, examination table, chairs, weight scales, radiological, mammographic equipment, and with the other diagnostic equipment accessible to people with disabilities, including the requirements of the equipment that requires transfer for the mobility aids and address the transfer services, support rails, armrests, and other features of the board developed with the chain with the consultation with the Food, Drug, and Administration. The Department of Transportation issued regulation mandating the accessible public transportation vehicles and facilities for the regulation will include the requirement of the new fixed route with the public transit buses may be accessible, supplemental, or trust services provided with those individuals with a disability who can also use fixed route bus services. 2014 U.S. Access Board, ABA Accessibility Guidelines, U.S. General Service to the Architectural Barrier Act. Accessibility standards updated with the new provisions outdoor developed area of the federal land, outdoor developed area that include the trails, picnics for the camping areas, as well as the beaching access routes. 2010 U.S. Department of Justice with the 2010 ADA accessible design with the contain with the accessible scoping with the technical requirements implemented with the American Accessibility Act of 1990. All the ADA covered facilities except for the transportation facility, the Department of Defense ABA accessibility standard with the Department of Defense facility that contain with the accessibility scoring of the technical requirements implicating the architectural barriers in 1968. 2006 U.S. General Services Administration of the Architectural Barrier Act assesses standards contain accessibility scoping technical requirements implementing Architectural Barrier Act of 1968. U.S. Department of Transportation ADA standard with the transportation facilities containing accessible scoping technical requirements implementing American with a Disability Act of 1990. 2005 the U.S. Postal Service standard with the facility accessibility containing accessibility scoping and technical requirements implementing the Architectural Barrier Act of 1968. 2004 ADA and ABA accessibility guidelines for the building facility updated with the last published for the Federal Register on May 7, 2014. Equal Opportunity Commission for the Management of Directive 715 provides roadmap with creating effective equipment equal opportunity employment opportunity programs for federal employees required by the Title 7 of the Rehabilitation Act. Help With America Vote Again requires equipment in voting booths for the equal access voting areas. ADA accessible guidelines amended that include guideline recreational facilities in 2002. 2000 ADA accessible guidelines amended to include the play areas. In 1998, the ADA certain guidelines amended to include the state and local government facilities. In 1991, U.S. Department of Justice ADA standards accessible to design contains accessible scope of the technical requirements implementing the American Disability Act of 1990. The Department of Justice, the ADA AG and standard ADA Title 7 with the new construction alterations. U.S. Department of Transportation 1991 ADA standard with accessible design transit facility vehicles. This is accessibility scope and technical requirements implementing American Disability 1990 adopted with the ADA AG with the standard for the new construction alteration transit facilities. In 1991, the Fair Housing Accessibility Guidelines provided minimal technical scope of the criterion complying with the Federal Housing Administration. In 1990, the American with a Disability Act prohibited discrimination based on disability, established design requirements for the construction and alteration facilities, required to be accessible for the cover of the facility with the private sector, public accommodation, commercial facilities in the public sector, state and local governments, accessible to Title I access workplace, Title II state and local government services, Title III place and public accommodation, commercial facilities, Title IV, Telecommunication, Hearing, Speech, and Impairment. Title V, Miscellaneous Instruction, Federal Agency, Enforcement Law. In 1998, Federal Housing Administration required that they adapt the feature of the certain coverage with a multi-dwelling with 4 or more units. 1984, Uniform Federal Accessibility Standard with contained with the accessible scope and technical requirements implementing the Architectural Barrier Acts of 1968. In 1973, Rehabilitation Act prohibited discrimination based on the disability programs conducted with the federal agency programs receiving the federal assistance for the federal employment of the employment practice for the federal contractor. Section 504 and 508, each agency owns a Section 504 regulations to apply with its program agency for the provide federal financial assistance. Also has Section 504 regulates covering it needs to receive federal aid. Requirements common for the regulation include reasonable accommodation employees with a disability program, accessibility, effective communication with the people who have the hearing and visual disabilities, and accessible new construction and alterations. 1968 Architectural Barriers Act required the facilities designed, constructed, altered, and leased with certain federal funds to accessible for the person with disabilities. 1964 Civil Rights Acts made racial discrimination in public places illegal, with required employers to provide equal opportunities, employment opportunities, and state that uniform standards must prevail for establishing right to vote. In 1961, American National Standard Institute A117.1 accessible using the building facilities recover the private sector model for the technical standard of the access feature of the document was first published in 2009 and is regularly updated. And that was Principles and Goals in Accessible Design Whole Building Design Guide.